what's up, everyone? Sam here, Wall Street Mastermind, and I'm here today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm talking with Rahul, who is a senior now at UVA, and Rahul actually came to Wall Street Mastermind, I think, halfway through his junior year. Interesting case because doesn't happen with a lot of our clients, but he actually came to us after he had already secured his summer internship at a small regional boutique doing FIG for his junior year summer, or Financial Institutions Group for those of you who don't know what that is. And but he came to us because he was kind of looking forward towards full-time recruiting, and that's kind of what he was looking for help with. And so now that he's done with the recruiting process, senior year already, he has his offer. Just wanted to get him to come on here and talk about his journey with you guys. I think that it will probably help a lot of you who are kind of in a similar situation as him, to just hear kind of how he was able to overcome some of the obstacles that he had and get to the outcome he wants. So, Rahul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to talk about the program and sort of my experience with everything and with you.
Awesome, man. Well, to start off, can you just kind of, I mean, I gave a very high level introduction right there, but can you just kind of walk people through kind of your profile or like your background, like just so people have a sense of what kind of candidate you are?
Yeah, so I go to UVA, which is let's say a pretty decent target school in terms of say half the bulge brackets, a lot of the elite boutiques, and a lot of regional banks try to recruit out of here. In terms of my like applicant profile, I had a decent slash lower GPA. Not extraordinarily high, but not like low to the point where I was being asked about it all the time. Um, so just like almost in a bad spot almost, just because you can't really have your story like around it. But
Right.
it is what it is. Uh, was in a decent amount of extracurriculars, but didn't really have any leadership positions in them. And besides that, it was also in the business school, which doesn't really matter anymore just because recruiting happens so early. But originally I thought that would be a big bonus for me, but it turned out it didn't really matter. So that's sort of what I was dealing with in the like spring of my sophomore year when I think that was the first year when banking recruiting happened so quickly, and that was sort of my profile back then, and still is
Got it.
now. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, I mean, that's actually a really good segue. If you take us back to the very beginning of your recruiting process. So I remember from our very first conversation, before you had joined as a client, that recruiting kind of caught you off guard with how early it started, right? Can you kind of talk to us about that? Like, you have been thinking about recruiting probably more than a year in advance, but you thought you could maybe start later, like in junior year or something?
Yeah. So talking to some elder students that I knew, most of them told me like, yeah, like banks will start coming around the fall of your junior year. Some of them maybe might reach out in August, right before you go to school. So that's sort of what I was prepared for. And I think it was like February or March of my sophomore year, I got an email from the career services page, which were like, these banks are coming to campus in the next week or so, looking to collect resumes and start interviewing, like hopefully within the next month. So for
Hmm.
me, that didn't really know what that entailed, like what that process would look like. I didn't really have a good resume. Like it was honestly really poorly formatted after talking to you. I realized that. And most importantly, I didn't have a story. Like I just knew I wanted to do investment banking because that's what most of the kids in my school did. And I was sort of interested in it after reading about it, but had no clue how to articulate that properly. And, was definitely caught off guard by the speed of things and how this sort of like how prepared you need to be going into like just getting the interview and also in the interview itself.
Got it. And so at the time, and I think this is the case with a lot of people, but even back, like if I think about what I was doing back in college, a lot of people initially, when they decide they want to do investment banking, it's because they see that that's what everyone else wants to do, right? And so I totally get that. now that you're kind of, a lot further along, you've actually gone through your junior summer internship and now you're recruited for full time. You're obviously a lot more knowledgeable now than where you were back then, but like, what are your motivations for like why you want to do banking? Because like this process is tough, right? Like for you to be willing to put in the time and energy and effort and make all these sacrifices just to get this job, like what is the reward for you in your mind?
Yeah, so I think there's two big things for me. First, it's just the learning experience you get. Even after summer, my knowledge of like corporate finance, just finance, and a lot of other stuff like how to talk to elder people, like even clients, just grew a lot.
Hmm.
You obviously you learn a lot of stuff in school, even whether you're at a target or non-target, you're going to learn like the basics of what a DCF is, but just a lot of little stuff like what a client ready presentation looks like, how to really think through a company, how to write intelligently, how to speak professionally. You don't get that stuff, I think, at any other job besides investment banking, and that's something that I really wanted to be a part of, is just gaining a lot of information about not only finance but a lot of more social skills, and it can prepare you for anything you want to do 5-10 years on the road. And for me,
Yeah.
that was like the biggest thing I learned,
Yeah.
and one of the biggest reasons I still wanted to continue investment banking. um, Two, I think this sort of connects it. It's like the doors it can open up for you in finance specifically. You know, whether you want to do PE, which is a really common route, stay in banking, do venture capital, or even hopefully one day become a CFO. This almost fast tracks you to those positions. I've seen a lot of people at different firms, obviously go through the PE route, but become corporate development heads at different companies, become one of the main managers at VC firms, hedge funds, whatever it may be. So I realize that most likely I won't be doing banking for my career like 20 years down the road, but this is the best way to do other stuff in finance, which I find a little bit more rewarding, like investing or running a company, and this is the best way forward. And then three, obviously, like the compensation is pretty good. There's talking to all my other friends who do other stuff, whether it's like tech or consulting, the compensation just doesn't compare. And even though you're
Mhm.
working hard, like it's nice to know that you're getting rewarded for all your hard work. So those
Right.
for me were the three big reasons.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense. I mean, that those are a lot of the same reasons for most people, I would say, right? It's the amount of learning you get to do, is the exit opportunities and just the flexibility and the optionality that you have. And then obviously sometimes people don't like admitting this. I don't know why, but like the compensation is super important in like whatever job you decide to take, right? Nobody wants to work for like, $10 an hour. Although
Yeah,
people like to joke that you're probably working for $10 an hour in banking, but anytime people make those jokes, I'm always like, man, you're so ignorant. Like, it's not about what you're making hourly in those 2 years. It's about what you're going to be making after those 2 years,
yeah.
right?
I mean, like I never said that in an interview, but that's obviously that was something in the back of my mind the whole time.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. For those of you that are listening, do not say that in an interview, just to be clear. But if we're being completely candid, and plus the interviewers know, like they themselves were probably the same way, but like everybody cares about the pay, right? I mean, if you say you don't care about the pay, you're probably lying. Um, okay. So then going back to that junior summer recruiting process, then so super rush, super last minute, like you were kind of caught flat-footed, so to speak. And then I guess you just went through the process anyway, and you applied to a bunch of places. I think if I remember correctly, like back then, what you had applied to maybe like 15 places or something, like maybe 10 of them came on campus and another five just from like your own applications or something like that.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. And then like I think at the time you told me that you had gotten maybe like 8 interviews or something around there. Does that sound about right?
Um, yeah, I would say 8 like phone calls or like phone interviews, and then if I'm remembering correctly, like 4 super days out of that.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, I think what I had written down is like you got oh no, you had yeah, two, 3 or 4 super days, and then you ended up getting 2 offers, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's actually, I mean, honestly, for someone who was caught off guard, like Hey, that's not bad. Like you at least got offers, which is more than what the vast majority of people can say. Out of the whatever 8 or so phone interviews you got, like what types of banks were you interviewing with? Was it like everything from bulge brackets down to regional boutiques, or was it, I don't know, like mostly middle market banks? Like how would you kind of categorize that?
Yeah, so I'd say like at the top, like the best banks I got were middle market banks. So like William Blair, Harris Williams, Houlihan, um, banks like that, and then got some like regional slash like yeah, like other ones were like regional investment banks,
Yeah.
and those are the ones I got the offers from, not the middle market ones.
Right, got it. Okay, so you got offers from the two offers you got were from probably on the lower end of the spectrum of out of all the opportunities that you had, basically.
Yeah,
Okay, so then how were you feeling about that at the time? I guess like probably if I read between the lines, like not completely. You're happy, obviously, because you obviously got an offer, but probably not completely satisfied, or else you probably wouldn't have came and worked with us.
yeah. Obviously I wasn't like happy or like I was a little disappointed in the results, but yeah, at the end I was happy I got an offer. But more than anything, I was pretty confused, just because I thought you know besides a few instances where I knew I like bombed an interview or something, I thought I'd done the best I could. Really had good answers to everything. Thought my resume
Mm,
was like you know comparable, if not good compared to the other candidates, but
mm,
just didn't know what was happening at the end of the day. So,
mm,
just wanted clarity. And it's
mm.
really hard to get clarity in these sort of situations where, no interviewer is going to reach back out to you and be like, hey, like, here are the things you can improve on, or like, you should change up your resume like this. Like, you just don't know. And that was
Right,
just a spot I didn't like being in.
right, right. Yeah, and I think that's a really uh, good word that you use there, which is clarity. Like most of the time, because I talk to so many students, like most of the time, what I find that people are really lacking is just that clarity. Like everybody kind of knows what you're supposed to do at a very, very high level when it comes to investment banking recruiting. They're like, oh, you need to have a good resume. You need to be good on networking. You need to know your technicals, and you need to have good stories prepared for your behavior. I was like, everybody knows that, like at the 30,000 foot level, but then when you really like get down into the weeds, you realize that people don't really know how to actually do that, right? Like,
Hmm.
how do you actually network effectively, right? Most people are just kind of, oh, I guess I'll reach out to some alumni and then, I don't know, ask them like the same questions every single time. And then it probably just ends after like one conversation. I think I remember you telling me like that was kind of like what you were doing too initially, right? In terms of your networking.
Yeah. So I'd reach out to alumni, get on the phone with them, um, have either decent or like below decent conversation, and then just be like, oh, they like know who I am, so they're definitely gonna pass my resume on, and then wouldn't get an interview, or like it wouldn't really help. So I'd just be again confused. I was like, oh, like is this not what you're supposed to do, or like didn't really know what networking actually meant.
Right, right. Yeah, most people kind of just do that. It's like, hey, I'm going to talk to this person once, like just get my name out there is what people say. Like, I'm going to get my name out there. And then now that my name's out there, hopefully when they're like sifting through the hundreds or thousands of resumes that they get, when they see my name on the resume, like that'll ring a bell and then that'll cause me to be selected. That's kind of like what a lot of people think, I think. But in reality, uh, that's that's like playing craps basically, right? It's like
Yeah,
you're hoping for something that's a super kind of a super long shot type of thing to happen, which is just not like you don't want to be gambling with something like a career, right? And
yeah,
so there's no clarity there on how to do that. And then like in terms of the interviewing side of things, what were I remember like I think you had asked one of your buddies for like some resources and whatever, and he sent you a bunch of stuff. Like what were like prior to Wall Street Mastermind, what were some of the resources you were using to help you prepare for this process?
like thinking back, I for the technical side, I use I think it was like the Breaking the Wall Street guides, which were,
Mm.
I mean, they were fine. Like they, just explained to you, or like essentially gave you a rubric to like memorize and say in an interview,
Yep.
without really understanding it. And especially because I didn't have any like business school background up to that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know what I was talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
then for like the behavioral side, I just try to, honestly just think on my feet, just be like, oh, like why investment banking? People say it's rewarding, so I'll say that. And I read somewhere that you get to work on like really cool deals, so I'll say that. And that
Mm-hmm.
was about it. So not really putting a lot of thought into it, just because I thought, if I ace the technical side of this interview, and I'll be fine. Like they don't really care what my answers to like tell me about yourself or like why investment banking or like all those other stuff. So didn't
Mm-hmm.
really understand that it's a pretty holistic process, and even if you like ace your technicals, but they don't like you or like they don't really buy your story, then you're not going to get that job.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So back then, you were operating with the assumption that, hey, as long as I nail my technicals, that's the most important thing. And the behaviorals is just like, whatever, like I'm just talking about myself and it can't be that hard, right?
Yeah,
Um, although I guess, in reality, what we always tell everybody is technicals are just kind of like that's the minimum requirement, right? Like obviously if you don't know your technicals, you're gonna get dinged and you're not gonna get the job. But nowadays it's so competitive and everybody has done their homework. A lot of candidates know their technicals, and so just by virtue of knowing your technicals, you're not necessarily going to stand out by any means, right? Like you may be on the same you may be on the same level playing field as all these other super smart and hardworking kids from Wharton and Columbia and NYU and whatever, all these super fancy target schools, and have taken all these finance classes, and then that alone is not. You're never going to be so much better than your competition at technicals that they just hire you purely based on that, basically, right?
yeah.
And so,
I was just gonna say like they know you're not an expert in corporate finance. Their whole job, at least in the summer internship, is to like train you up. So they're not like at the end of the day too worried whether you can like perfectly walk through an LBO, but mainly matters whether they want to work with you or not. Like whether they want to be up till 3 a.m. sitting right beside you. That I think that's a lot more important than how well you can read like the Breaking the Wall Street Guide or whatever.
right. And then like on the behavioral side, I mean, like you said, it's about the way you talk about yourself, like kind of affects how likable of a person you are and whether you're someone that they want to work with, right? And whether you have the traits and qualities that they look for in a successful analyst. The thing is, like you said, on the technical side, that's all stuff that they can teach you, right? But on the behavioral side, they're not really going to be able to teach you how to behave or change the type of person that you are. And so they're going to screen harder for that, um, because if they make the wrong hire behaviorally, then it's probably not going to be a great fit, right? So,
Yeah,
and by the way, like on the behavioral side, you actually can uh, outcompete the other candidates by having much better answers, right? Because it's not like the technicals. If you have the right answer, you have the right answer, and everybody's answers are the same. On the behavioral side, if you have better answers than other people, you actually can stand out from that, and that doesn't affect just your interviews, but it actually, going back to the networking piece, it affects your networking as well, right? Because networking, a lot of times you're having to talk about yourself, um, in addition to asking them questions. And if you're not pitching yourself the right way, they're just not going to want to refer you, right?
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so I remember, I think back when we first spoke, like you said, you have focus most of your time on learning things like DCFs and LBOs, and trying to memorize this stuff. Not, I don't think you were like truly understanding everything, but you're just kind of memorizing everything, which I think didn't really work out for you very well, right?
Hmm.
And you knew the basics, but you couldn't really understand the concepts you were saying. Like it took you. I think you remember I remember you told me that it took you a month during the summer when you really had time to like really try to study everything thoroughly, and then later that summer you felt much better, right?
Yeah, it took a while to like actually. if they asked me a question that wasn't, directly from the guide or something, like the 400 questions list, to not just regurgitate something, but actually understand and like give a articulate answer. That happened way later.
Yeah, and I mean, like that's the thing is that most people they just try to memorize this stuff, and because that's really all you can do with these guides. It's not interactive. You're reading on a page. It's not like they're actually teaching or explaining things to you or answering your questions. And so people just memorize. But like as someone who's actually gone through two recruiting processes now, one for the summer and one for full time, like what percentage of time would you say you actually got like the exact same technical questions that you memorized?
I think early in my sophomore year, it was pretty much off the guides or whatever. But when you're interviewing like in July, August, especially like August on, like none of the questions are from the guide. Like it's all about, do you understand this info, and like can you give me like an analysis of what I just said, or like what is this actually telling me? Not really just walk me through a DCF. Like I don't think you're ever going to get those questions in you know these hard interviews, or like just any, especially at super days.
Right, right. And so it's more like application knowledge, basically. Not like have you memorized the formula, but do you know how to actually apply this to like real world situations?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And I guess like for you too, since you were actually interviewing for full time, like you and your competition, most of you guys already had some experience under your belt. Like you've done a summer internship, so at that point, probably the bar is even higher. Like the expectation is that, of course, you know what a DCF is, and of course, you know what M&A and LBO and all that stuff is. But it's more like how do you actually use it, or like being able to talk about these things in the context of an actual transaction that you worked on and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Just a lot of that.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So you use mostly the guides. I think your behavior answers, what you told me at the time, was like your answers were very generic and didn't seem like your interviewers were super impressed with your answers. And you kind of just like try to talk to other students that you knew about how you could answer those questions more effectively. But that was kind of how you were going about it, right?
Yep.
Okay. Um, and so what, so you tried that, and then you got into a regional boutique for the summer. You weren't completely satisfied with that outcome. um then like what, how did you find Wall Street Mastermind, and like what made you want to join our program?
So yeah, I think I found it on, it was like one of my recommended pages on Facebook. I guess their data analytics are pretty solid on that front. So just clicked on it, looked through what was going on, and I think I clicked on your profile and then ultimately ended up on the website. I saw your experience in the industry, and I thought, so this is somebody who actually has like been in there, like has interviewed people as well as like done interviews like for jobs, not only in investment banking but private equity and corporate finance roles. So it's definitely somebody who I definitely thought you were somebody who would have firsthand knowledge about interviews and like what specifically investment bankers really look for,
Mhm.
and just decided to give you a call and just see if it would be worth it for me.
Got it. Okay. And then we had that first call where I learned more about your situation and kind of a lot of things that we already talked about just now. And then you basically had to make a decision on whether you wanted to join the program or not, right? So, like, what was your thought process at the time? Like, were you skeptical at all? I mean, after all, like, this is some dude you just found on the internet, right? Like, you didn't really know
Yeah.
me that well, but like, how did you kind of think through that decision, or like what was your decision making framework there?
Yeah. So my rationale was, if it's just going to be like, you sending me stuff and then me reading it and then just being done after like 10 weeks, or like, yeah, that's not something I was really interested in, because I've tried that approach and for me it didn't really work. But I think you
Mhm.
really sold me on the interactive aspect of it, where if I wanted to have a mock interview or like talk to you about the way I was answering a question, then either you'd hop on the call or like I could just chat with you and we could talk about it and really develop a strategy moving forward, not just a generic cookie cutter, like here's how you do it approach. And once I learned that, and that like that's how it'd be, then I was sold. And then, my parents were sold on the fact that your results were, obviously solid and spoke for themselves. And, that it's just a huge ROI right there.
Right, right. And so what was so you came in the program. Let's talk a little bit about your actual experience in the program. So that was like your expectations coming in, right? Was that it's going to be this interactive, customized thing, um, tailored to your background and your experiences and whatever challenges you're having. So like talk about your actual experience in the program, like what do we do together and like what was actually helpful to you?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that we did was like, tear apart my resume, really go through the basics of what stands out, what looks better, just scanning through it, which I thought was a really important step for me just because mine looked so bad at the time. And, changing it, I think got me a lot more looks than I would have otherwise. And then from
Mm,
there, really learning what networking is, like how to effectively do it, what the point of networking is, um, just learning the basics of all those things, which really helped me understand what I needed to do and just have a strategy moving forward to have my initial outreach and make sure everything on paper looks good, so I can eventually be set up for interviews.
mm,
And once I got sort of the basic stuff out of the way, which I thought was incredibly helpful, then it moved into more of you know the interview side, like what do I need to do to ace my interviews. And I think we both realized that like I probably don't need to spend as much time on technicals just because at that time I was, semester deep or semester and a half deep into business school. And, you know, I'd done a lot more like work on my own just in terms of, applying the knowledge I learned to. But, definitely there was a lot of videos that still help a student in my situation.
mm,
But I guess the biggest part for me was really understanding my story, like how to convey my story, having if somebody asks me like a random behavioral question, having stories that and like examples I can fall back on, and having that like at the top of my mind, not just somewhere back deep where it's like I just can't pull it up. So
mm,
getting that all on paper, talking about it with you, and then just a bunch of mock interviews after that, which and the best part about those is what you were brutally honest. So if you didn't like the way something sounded, you weren't afraid to tell me. You're like sugarcoat it. You told me straight up like, hey, it's not a good answer. Like, let's reframe it in this way. Or like, it was okay, but like, I think you can do better. And like this, and this. So like real concrete examples of where I could get better in my interviews.
mm,
And I think that was probably the biggest thing for me in terms of,
mm,
passing phone interviews and getting on networking calls and ultimately getting offers.
mm. Got it. So you basically, if I kind of recap what you said, just like right there, and my connection cut out for like 5 seconds in between, but I think what you said was um, we completely redid all of your application materials, like resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, the stuff that you'd be applying with and using to network. We gave you a lot more clarity on how to actually network, so that you were no longer just having like one conversation with these people and then like hoping that they'll refer you, but you actually were a lot more strategic about going after whatever it is that you're trying to get, which most of the time is going to be a referral for a job, right? And then those two things probably um, massively increased your chances of getting selected for interviews. And then we focused on the interview side, and the beauty of the program is that it's all customized based on your needs. And so for you, you're actually unique or a little different from other people in that most people come in feeling like, oh, I need a lot of help with technicals and I don't need that much help with behaviorals, even though in reality, usually they do need help with behaviorals. But for you, you felt like you were pretty good on the technicals, but you were looking for a lot more feedback on the behavioral side where it's a lot more subjective and it's really difficult for you to self-diagnose what you're doing wrong essentially. And so like
Mhm.
what we were able to give you was just like brutally honest feedback on how to change certain things, which you probably weren't getting from other people, right? I mean, you're definitely not getting that from your interviewers, but I'm guessing even outside of Wall Street Mastermind, you've probably done like mock interviews at school with just your peers and maybe upperclassmen and stuff like that, or no?
Yeah, no, I definitely did a lot of like mock interviews during the summer with my friends who I knew had, internship offers, or even sometimes like other students that I knew, but at the end of the day, they didn't have any like hiring experience or like
Mm,
know what to really look for. So they'd
mm,
just be like, "Oh yeah, that was fine," or like, maybe emphasize this point more. In reality, like the whole structure of it was wrong. I
mm.
wasn't really giving off anything, you know, of substance. I would say that like the interviewer could really like, get attached to and remember me for.
Yeah. So I would say, so you would say then the biggest difference, because I wanna kind of touch on this point a little bit because I think a lot of times I talk to students and they say, well, I'm just gonna practice with like a senior or someone who just went through the recruiting process or whatever, and they got a job, so I'm sure they'll be able to help me do the exact same thing. But you're saying the biggest difference between doing that versus doing, say, a mock interview with me is just the amount of feedback you actually get and also the specificity of the feedback you get. Like it's at a much more granular level than just like the same answer that you gave to them and to me. Like they probably told you, oh yeah, that's fine. Whereas I actually gave you a lot of different refinements that you could have made to make it even better. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and like a lot of the times they, ultimately don't know, like haven't heard enough interviews to actually make a judgment on whether my, answer is like good or bad. So,
Mm,
and also like they probably don't care. Like even though they're your friends, like they lose focus sometimes, like don't really listen. All that stuff could happen, and you're not. I don't think you're getting good feedback from just either practicing alone or with elder students. So
mm,
uh,
got it.
it just doesn't compare, I think, in my eyes.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. You made two really good points there, which is one, they're not that experienced, so they have a very, very small sample size of data to kind of like benchmark your answers against, right? And so when it's something that's so subjective, um, you don't want to base the assessment of your answers on just like a couple of data points because it might not be accurate, right? And then the
Yeah,
other the other point that you're making is just that ultimately, even though they're your friends, they don't have that much skin in the game, and they're not gonna be as invested in your outcome as you would be. And so it's not super important to them to like spend a lot of time and energy and effort to give you the best feedback possible. Whereas I guess if you work with someone like me, your success is kind of my success, and like I want all my clients to be successful, and obviously you're paying me money to help you, and so I have skin in the game, and I have to be investing in your outcome, and I have to give you the best quality feedback that I can possibly give you, essentially.
yep,
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. Look, I think those are all really great points and people don't really think about. um the and we're gonna come up on just like one or two last questions, but one thing I did want to talk to people about too is like, can we tell people a little more about just kind of like the full-time recruiting process? Because like, a lot of times I interview these kinds, like the vast majority of my clients, they're usually trying to recruit for summer internships, right? Which is, as you know, like those two processes are very different, right? So can you talk about some of the differences between the summer process and the full-time recruiting process? Like, which one do you think is harder, and like why?
yeah. So in my experience, I thought full time was, harder for a couple reasons. First, there are no guaranteed spots at places, right? So like you could you could have a really good network at a certain bank, which you developed over the course of a couple months, and then at the end of the summer, this sort of happened to me. They're like, like sorry man, we just like don't have any spots open, or like we need to wait like another month to see if whether like the interns take their return offers or not. So just whether those spots are open or not, like has nothing to do with how good you are as a candidate. It's ultimately up to them versus like summer internship recruiting, like, at a bulge bracket, there'll be whatever, 50 to 100 spots open, or like elite boutiques, 50 spots, which are, specifically designed that they want to fill. And
Mm-hmm.
So that's one big difference. Two, the interviews itself weren't necessarily like technically harder, but they, definitely expect you to know like you better be like rock solid in terms of what you did this summer, like why do you want to do investment banking, like why their bank, and like that specific questions like doesn't come up as much in like summer internship recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So having somebody who can like talk that through was like really important to me. Like how do I talk about my deal experience? How do I talk about, you know, why I want to go to this bank or like why this industry group? All that stuff is if you don't have a very good answer to that, like, you're just not going to get that job. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, I would say, the expectation, like, even if you have a good network, like, at the end of the day, like, you just have to be spot on because, this goes back similar to what, like, I was saying earlier, like, there's so few spots open that, one of the jobs they had, like, 30 kids from, different school, like, from my school specifically, interview for a first round for one spot. So, like,
Oh,
like
wow.
the way you stand out is, it's just, you have to be spot on everything you say. Like you have to make really good impressions and you have to like stand out at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
you can only really do that through either having like an insane network, um, which is like, pretty hard to do, or like have a combination of a good network plus just kill it in the interviews.
Right. So you said that opportunity, that group was hiring one person because the rest of the spots had already been taken up by their summer interns, and they interviewed 30 people for first round just from your school only.
Yeah. So we had like a pre-networking event. There's, it was like a mix of summer and like full time, but there's at least like 50 people there.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, man. So if I were to summarize that, I think what you're saying is like obviously, hey, the interview is a little bit harder because the expectation is higher, and also you're competing against other candidates who now have more experience after a summer, right? And so just the type of questions that you're gonna have to answer is going to be more advanced. But I think it sounds like the biggest challenge is just the fact that there are a lot fewer opportunities, right? Like for the summer recruiting process, essentially all the jobs are available, right? None of them have been filled yet. So if this firm has 50 spots, then all 50 spots are going to be available. If they have 100 spots, then all 100 spots are basically up for grabs. By the time they recruit for full time, say if they had 100 spots, maybe 80 or 90 of those have already been given to returning summer interns who did a good job. And then like the last 10 are basically up for grabs. And so it's just a numbers thing, basically.
Hmm. And you
Got
you
it.
can definitely do a lot to like hedge against that. Where, I mean, if you have a solid network in place and you reach out like in July or August, be like, hey, you know, internship's going well. Like I think I'm on track for a return offer, but I don't really want to be here. Like I was just wondering like how how your group is looking in terms of return offers, or if you guys do have a process, I'd love to be involved. Like if you like do the legwork early on, then you can definitely minimize that risk. But at the end of the day, it's still a little it's not always up to you or like
Yep.
who you know.
Yep. Yeah. And I think what you're highlighting there is just that networking is always important, and it was really important for summer opportunities, but like for full time it's even more important because at least for the summer, I think like sometimes if you go to a target school and you have good enough stats and whatever, you might be able to still get selected for on-campus interviews without doing a ton of networking, right? But then for full time, because they're not running like actual structured process, I don't know what your experience is, but like a lot of the groups I find, like maybe they have one spot or maybe they have two spots that they're trying to fill. Um, they're not like going out and doing a full-on recruiting process for that. They a lot of times they'll ask people on the team like, "Hey, we gotta fill this one spot. Like anybody in your network that you think would be a good fit?" And it's kind of based on just like who you know and like knowing the right people in the right places at the right time, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and if you don't know anyone in that group, then you probably never hear about that opportunity, or like by the time you find out about it, like it's too late because they've already filled it or whatever.
Yep.
Got it. So you had to like knowing that, hey, you were most likely going to recruit again for full time. Like, how early did you start, like, kind of laying the groundwork for that? Like, how early did you start kind of, planting the seeds and networking with people and reaching out and just building up that network? Was that like halfway through summer, or did you like start even earlier?
Yeah, so I started in March, around March, I would say reaching out, and it was probably best that I did it then because I remember like having interviews like in mid-July for like full-time positions. So, and if I hadn't networked with people, like there's no way I would have got those interviews. So, you know, the I took your approach to networking where it's not, just me like bombarding them with questions, but really trying to have a conversation, really getting to know the person or like them getting to know me. And then, when necessary slash like relevant following up. So, there was one example where, it was for a specific, like a restructuring group where, we had a pretty solid conversation and he like gave me some material to read up on. And I think like June, I like reached back out. This is after like, talking to him in like April, like, hey, like, got to read through some of the material. I had a couple questions about it. Love to hop on the phone. And he saw my interest in like doing what he said, and from there he connected me with other people, and then also he got a couple interviews out of that. So
Mm,
it's just you need to, I think you need to start, especially for full-time, start as early as possible.
yeah.
Um, and have a reason to do it. My like every time I called somebody, I'd always be like, hey, just wanted to reach out to get to know more about like like investment banking in general before I start my first internship, and like what to expect and like how to do my best job. So you know having a solid conversation started and like following up, not for random reasons, but when appropriate and when it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And so you started really early, and like let's give people some value here. Like, I know the question that people are probably going to ask is, so if you already have a summer internship, but then you're going to recruit for different firms, and you're trying to network with people at these different firms, like, how do you kind of position that? Because you hadn't started your summer internship yet, right? But like also
Yeah.
at the same time, you already have a job, so it's not like you can't, or do you just tell these people that, hey, I want, like, I eventually want to recruit for your firm, or how did you go about positioning that?
Yeah, the the way I did it was, start off with like, hey, like, just wanted to talk to as many people in the industry as possible. A lot of them were alum at like different banks, so that helped out a little bit.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were random too, like just random cold emails. So, and from there, be like, yeah, I'm not totally, I sort of took this job just because I want to be investment banking. Obviously, want to do my best and hope that this turns out well, but definitely open to things in the future. Uh, and just leave it at that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, like, I'll definitely let you know, like, reach out, at this day, if and I'll let you know if we have any spots open or stuff like that. So I never really said that I'm looking to recruit at their bank, but just sort of said like I want to keep my options open, and
Right.
just love to talk to you about your experience with like your internship and like your analyst role.
Right. Right. Okay. I mean, that's super helpful for all the people that are listening right now who are, going to recruit for full time. I mean, Rahul just dropped a bunch of value bombs for you guys. So, hope you guys are taking notes. And so last question on the full time recruiting then, like, around at what point in the summer would you say these firms started, like, seriously interviewing or having like more serious conversations about uh, potentially taking on for full time? Because I was like, they, like, when they start talking to you, they might not know whether they're going to have a spot yet, but like, when
Yeah.
did those conversations actually start happening?
Yeah. So as I said, the earliest one was in like mid-July. I think they knew they were gonna have spots open, or like they underhired or something.
Mm,
Um, I would say that's pretty rare, like starting that early. Most banks that I knew started their process either a week before the internship actually ended, or a couple weeks after, you know, you're after your 10 weeks. So from there, it's reaching out to your network, asking if they have any open spots left. And then, if they do, or if they like you enough, they'll refer you to other people. You just keep hopping on the phone with other people. Then, eventually one of these like networking calls, if you had enough, will turn to like an interview. And
mm,
that sort of started like mid-August to early September when I started getting back to school. And from there, like, I know some like elite boutiques are still recruiting for positions, so it never really stops, I think. But that's sort of when you can expect to kick it off. It's last week of the internship to like the week right after is when most of the stuff starts really heating up.
Got it. Okay, awesome, man. That's super helpful for our listeners. So thank you for sharing all that. I guess at this point, let's can we tell people kind of what was the outcome ultimately for this entire journey for you? Like, um, you ended up getting a couple of different offers for full time, right?
Yeah,
So like, what were the offers that you got, and like, where are you ultimately going?
yeah. So I got offers from Stiefel and their like diversified industrials group, and DC Advisory and their like technology software group.
Hmm.
Ultimately decided to go DC Advisory just because you know, tech was something I was more interested in and thought it'd be just like the people more there. I had more alumni there, and that's ultimately what I ended up going with.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And DC Advisory, like that's by the way, like congratulations on that. That's huge. Um, Stifel and DC Advisory, I mean, they're both very good middle market banks, but like DC Advisory looks like they're pretty global, right? They're in like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just looking at their website, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. They're in like 14 different countries and like
Yeah,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and like 12 different industries. And so obviously this is not like, this is like a very, very a global, very legitimate bank with quite a good amount of deal flow. Like I see a lot of a lot of senior bankers there. And so like you're going to be doing tech there out of their headquarters, right? Is it their headquarters in DC?
um, I, I'm not totally sure. It might be New York, but I know that like the DC is a bigger office than the New
Got it.
York one, or like similar size. So, and
Got it.
a lot of the senior people there, I was pretty impressed by their backgrounds and like where
Got
they
it.
came from. So I thought it'd be definitely a great learning opportunity for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, and I'm looking at like the deals that they've done that are listed on websites. Like they've done a lot of deals, which is awesome. It means you're gonna get a good experience. And so very cool. Well, look, obviously it's been a long journey. It's been almost a year since we started working together. I get 11 months as of
Yeah,
today. And so um, obviously like nothing good ever comes easy, but you're now on the other side of this process, and I just want to congratulate you on all the success, um, and obviously it's a great accomplishment to end up at a firm like that out of college. Like a lot of people would kill to be in your position, and for the rest of you that are that have been listening to this, I just want to let you guys know, like, look, if you are in a similar situation as Rahul, where maybe you recruited for a summer internship, and you got something, but you're not, it's not something that you maybe want to do for full time, or you're not completely satisfied, or worse yet, if you're recruited for a summer internship and you actually just didn't get anything in investment banking at all, now you want to try again for full time. You just got to realize that full-time recruiting is going to be a lot more competitive. Like if you thought summer internship recruiting was hard, full-time is way harder. Just like it's a numbers game, and there's way fewer jobs. The competition, the caliber of the competition is higher. And so, if you're looking for help with that, you should reach out to us. We can absolutely help you um, get a better outcome than you'd be able to get on your own. Maybe that's the difference between going from no offer to having an offer in banking. Maybe it's going from a smaller bank to more of a middle market or bulge bracket bank, right? And so either way, though, like that incremental difference or improvement um, can have a huge impact on your career, right? I think a lot of times people are kind of short-sighted about this, and they think that, oh, it's just going to affect the first year or two out of college. Like in reality, like where you start has like long-term impact on kind of like where you end up eventually, right? Like just the slope of the trajectory of your career can be entirely different, right? And so if you guys want that type of help, kind of like what Rahul described today, feel free to reach out to our team. You start by scheduling a free strategy session. It's kind of that first call that Rahul and I had as well. And you can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street and the URL is abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And you'll get on the phone with our team, or maybe you might get on the phone with me, depending on the schedule, and we'll talk to you. Just learn more about your situation, see what it is that you need help with, and also what are your goals. And if we think that we can help you with those things, and we're confident that we can get you to that outcome, we'll be happy to take you on as a client. But if not, then at a minimum, we will give you just a lot of clarity and also advice on what we think we would do if we were you. Because the truth of the matter is, like, we're pretty busy, and there are a lot of people that want help with investment banking, but we can't work with all of them. So there's no pressure, but either way, you'll walk away with a ton of value, and hopefully we get to talk to you guys soon. So that will be it for today, guys. And Rahul, again, I want to thank you for taking an hour time out of your day to come and share your experiences with our listeners. And I know for a fact that people are going to benefit from this a lot, especially all the advice you gave them on full-time recruiting and whatnot towards the end there. So thank you. And again, congratulations on all the success. I look forward to seeing, what you're able to accomplish. And, just like all the other alumni in Wall Street Mastermind, I'm sure we'll keep in touch. And, don't be a stranger. Like, always feel free to reach out if I could help you with anything.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for everything the past year. It's, definitely wouldn't be here without your help and your sort of like guidance on everything. So, definitely well worth it for me, and hope it's well worth it for other people too.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. It was my pleasure. It was my honor to serve you. And thank you again for taking time. Guys, that'll be it for today. And, as always, we'll be back again soon with more of these in the near future. All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.